I'm going to read some poems from my second book, Monograph, and I'm also going to read some new poems that I wrote specifically for this reading, and which I finished today.
Damn.
So we'll see how those go. What you need to know about this, I became fascinated with the idea of the divorce book, the genre of the divorce book a few years ago, and so I thought I'd try my hand at it. You'll notice that all the names have been replaced by initials for both entertainment and legal purposes. And other than that, I just feel like, as I should give at the beginning of every poetry reading, it's actually not illegal to laugh if you find something funny, so just all right, so here's Monograph. Thought back to that first October after moving to the city, both of us temping, broke, and in debt, barely able to afford the rent on a basement efficiency next to the elevator. Our sole extravagance, a bonsai tree stiffening on the window. Fairly certain we were doomed as a couple. Repeating this to myself every night as I walked home in darkness through the close suburban streets, the smell of the sea infiltrating the fog, utterly ecstatic with rage. When my grandfather tried to tell my dad obliquely that my mother was mentally ill, he had to take him out on the water in a rowboat to do it. There, they were safe, or at least equally in danger. He, like other New England fishermen, could not swim. These are the people I come from. R says C has been dredging up a bunch of sexual trauma. This is the second girl he's dated who was raped in the past. Last night, he came home stoned. C was enraged, and when he turned his back on her, she punched him. He just said, "I can't believe you did that," then walked away. She rushed after him, shouting, "Wait, don't you want to know why I hit you?" When my dad was traveling and teaching healing in Europe, he woke in his hotel one morning and discovered his passport was missing. The room was full of spirit guides, arguing about where he should go next. As soon as he yelled at them, they vanished, and the passport instantly appeared in front of him on the table. These kinds of ambiguous difficulties are not, as they say in the literature, but they're what make this real for me. If I took one thing from my father's universe, it's that everyone has an agenda, even when they don't have a body. N told me she trained herself to masturbate with highlighters. First one, then two, then three. It was her reward for doing homework. I cannot imagine she thought I would be able to resist lingering over this metaphor. How French to make scholarship seem sexy. How American to make the emphasis literal. When I was born, I weighed 8 pounds. 12 months later, I was back down to my birth weight and dying. During this year, my mother wore jeans every day, the same pair of jeans. Clearly, she did not want to be recognized as anything other than a depressed person. There are worse uniforms, I suppose. Compared notes with D. He has sex about 3 times a month, while I only have it twice a month. He was cheerful. Well, it sounds like your marriage is in a lot worse shape than mine. He is thinking of bugging his wife's computer because he suspects she is cheating. She calls him drunk at 3 a.m. to come pick her up from his friend's house. He wishes, with a great deal of fervency, that he could confirm his suspicion that she was sexually abused as a child. It's all very Eastern. The night Virginia Woolf finally slept over, her lover, Vita Sackville West, memorialized the event in her diary by simply writing 3 exclamation points. I myself would want 4, which demonstrates that the first thing one wants to do with a metaphor is to wreck it. Talking with Z, he's worried that his poems are depressing. Well, of course they are, I say. They have to be. Z sighs. Why, exactly? Because we need to experience trauma in an artful way. Z pauses. Really? Sure, I say. Metaphor is practically one of the only things that can slip past our defenses. Otherwise, we don't give a damn about what happens to us. We feel we deserve it. Gosh, Z says, you're charming when you're bleak. I argue with my mother about free will and whether or not God cares if I stay together with N. She leaves me a long voicemail, which ends with, I have one word for you. Then she says what I swear sounds like pussy. At first, I think she's had a psychotic break. This is, after all, a woman whose preferred medium is an airbrushed greeting card with calligraphy and a well-manicured Jesus. But then she listens to it and figures out that what she actually said was prophecy. I am immensely relieved, but I'm amazed that I couldn't hear it. G gently slaps my cheek. Hey, I know these things. You may be a writer, but I am a slut muffin. Beware my terrible powers. N and I disagree about how to handle a writer's gender. I always try not to undress an author in my mind. When I'm reading, I'm afraid I'll discover that they're totally smooth down there. N scoffs. She thinks you can't help it. The way you just know when you're reading a Hemingway short story. Boy meets gun. Trouble ensues. Complication arrives in the form of a woman. Commas begin to seem expensive and precious. Much complaining about alcohol and ammunition, but no sex. Someone milks a snake. N and I go out to the Italian restaurant with G, whose husband is traveling, and her protege, a violinist at the conservatory. He says he'll be satisfied if he's half as hated as Paganini was. We drink ruddy, blood-orange mimosas, and G orders us cavatini with boar and white truffles. I describe my obsession with the black market mushrooms allegedly grown on the bodies of the dead. The ones harvested from the jaw and head are the most expensive, while the ones that sprout from the groin are said to be poisonous. G and N match each other drink for drink until N excuses herself. G smirks. Them's the breaks. But she's premenstrual, so you've got to be fucking her like a dog. Oh. She squeezes my knee under the table. N is vomiting into a grate on the sidewalk. I come back in to tell G that we're leaving and see her kissing the violinist. I duck behind the lattice near the entrance like an extra in a Feydeau farce, caught between equal but opposing absurdities.
Damn.
Return for the second half of Christmas with N's family. Overhear her father gloating to a friend on the phone about his lack of reaction when opening his presents. You should have seen their faces. So crestfallen. N says he's difficult to shop for. I stare into my pallid eggnog as the plastic cup flexes in my hand. Went out last night with M in a lavender tie and a purple shirt. Felt like a sexual racketeer. Chandler would have approved. M says he is fighting every night with R, who is triumphantly agoraphobic. They both scream and cry and threaten to flee the apartment. Then they have sex. At first, I was frightened, then jealous, then frightened again. N confesses to me that she watched G.I. Joe as a kid, and then she wanted to be Scarlet. I myself loved the mute, scarred Snake Eyes. I am dumbfounded. Even as a 10-year-old, I found the show unbelievably hokey. No one ever got killed, and the M16s fired dotted lines of lasers, despite the fact that they were clearly wearing belts of ammunition. At first, I marvel over the irony. I'm a pacifist who's never been in a fight. She's a reformed radical lesbian, yet we like the same campy military cartoon. Then I get sad. This is what you fall in love over. Dreamed that a lot of people had been killed and buried in the sand. Realized that this was the bloody cove of my childhood, where a bunch of Native Americans were massacred, and where I had daily lessons on the tennis courts every summer. According to my grandfather, this is what a well-bred young man did, along with sailing and ignoring the 20th century. Not terribly surprising that I tend to think of masculinity itself as a type of minor catastrophe. A says her father put a penny in a jar on the dresser every time he and his wife made love. After their first year of marriage, the jar was halfway to the top. It took him the rest of his life to make it. A terrible argument for and against infinity. My mother tries to convince me not to leave N by enlisting the Jehovah's Witnesses with whom she has been flirting. They understand about mysteries, she says, about what draws people together. Well, what I understand, I say, is that they have incorrectly predicted the end of the world 16 times. She gets angry. So you're going to be just like your father, who didn't think we should be a family? Is that what you want? I barely refrain from pointing out that even though he was the one who filed, she chose to get divorced. He wasn't going to leave her. That is, until he discovered that the only thing that was more exciting for her than secretly having sex with a drug dealer who didn't speak any English was refusing to stop when she was caught. It couldn't just be a mistake. It had to be a story. Galen held that in order for women to conceive, she must achieve orgasm. Using this logic, if you got pregnant from a rape, you must have enjoyed it, and therefore consented in the first place, making it not a rape. This Roman belief is what gave rise to a flurry of Victorian property law. They were worried about social climbing, that women would be forced to marry their lower-class rapists and give them their dowries. This is why they were not allowed to own anything. Mind you, the Victorians also tried to claim that the rampant prostitution in the streets was merely an epidemic of nymphomania. The poor dealers.
Dumbasses.
N and I are discussing the perfected female body and whether or not pleasure is inversely proportionate to form. I think of the early Islamic scholars and mystics who invented the idea of the Awri, namely, a woman who is hairless, except for the eyebrows and head, who does not menstruate, urinate, or defecate, and is transparent right down to the marrow of her bones, like red wine in a white glass. N tries to end the discussion by declaring, I just want to be a Barbie that's capable of orgasm. I laugh and realize I'm suddenly very angry, though I'm not sure on whose behalf.
Don't let me say it, boo.
Oh no, you got it.
Okay.
Argue with F about the poem where the speaker can't sleep with her husband without thinking of the Ecuadorian woman with her head beaten in by paramilitaries. F thinks this is a virtuous, writerly act. I just feel sad for the poet's husband. Sex shouldn't be social work. The sexual optimism that comes front-loaded with a Y chromosome is virtually impossible to dampen. You don't think it will happen. You don't even want it to happen, yet you go around prepping for it all the same. It's humiliating. My dad discloses that he actually briefly succeeded in dragging my mother to couples counseling. After their time was up, the therapist announced with peculiar intensity, the men's bathroom is right down the hall. As my dad was returning, the therapist slipped out and intercepted him in the corridor. I shouldn't be doing this, he said. It's not even professional. But that woman in there just wants a house and money, and she wants you to take care of everything. He paused meaningfully. They looked at each other. Generally, men bore me, but I have to admire this moment. We may not be able to approximate an honest emotion, but damned if we can't float an implication. Z helps me look past the long conversation, wherein I will attempt to explain to N that experiencing a crippling orgasm of fury when it comes time to apologize is fatal, romantically speaking. All you have to do, he says, is utter these things calmly, look at her out of slitted eyes, and then vanish, like a ninja. I am not comforted. Where will I go? Am I going to be one of those divorced people with an empty loft? Z shakes his head. Don't be silly. Ninjas don't need furniture. Anne reveals in couples therapy that she went off birth control 3 months ago, as if she had actually told me she was no longer taking her pills. She says it with such a lack of emphasis that it takes me a moment. Then the room becomes bright and horribly detailed. After swimming, E and I drive through the calm oaks on either side of the back road. We stop at a gourmet grocery store set randomly beside a field, buy pomegranates and dark chocolate, and sit down at the edge of the parking lot. Watch the effortless light on the tall grass, the sun going down. E talks about the Masons, theoretical particles, her new love, what they do and don't have to do with each other. I say nothing, which makes me suspect that I am happy. Anne would never let me kiss or lick the small serif on the side of her breast where they removed the mass. It was neither benign nor malignant, simply anomalous. I liked it because it made me think of the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a work of ceramic broke, they would inlay the cracks with gold and find it more beautiful afterwards because it existed in time now and had a history. E reads the foregoing, says I'd better be grinning on the back cover in psychedelic plaid and a beanie. I imagine myself standing in front of a mushroom cloud, looking engaged. Q lives near the crater with 2 mutants and what used to be a cat. There are many endings, most of them atomic. This is one. Thank you.